Keep in mind the over 10 million people in the world in secret societies linked to Masonry wish to bring in the destruction of Christianity. First, they must promote atheism, and then they will bring in the Luciferian doctrine. Atheism is a movement funded by the aristocracy for the purpose of giving them more respect. And as society is conditioned by scientific atheism, if you will, or the philosophy of science, it will eventually lead people to believe that there is no God at odds with the devil, but rather the rich and the intellectual class are gods who have manifested deistic spirits, if you will, that allowed them to rise above everyone else. And they will be worshipped to the extreme. But first, atheism must be used along with the other philosophies that are the enemies of Christianity to prepare for the Luciferian doctrine to be brought in. This is what Albert Pike, the most celebrated Mason in America, has said flat out. It was he who brought in the greater Masonic plan. And perhaps Masons even allowed for the Union to win the Civil War. But it was only for the greater Masonic agenda to bring a Luciferian society in where elite worship is commonplace and quote-unquote scientific, but really it is pseudoscience nonsense. So the viewer may be left wondering, well, why are they promoting atheism? And yet causing its destruction at the same time. Because atheism as a social policy is a failed ideal. It creates chaos and a massive criminal state. What they're really bringing in is scientific atheism or atheistic Satanism. So they are going to destroy atheism as you know it. But they will accept the Masonic God. So it will be replaced with the masses of people accepting the Masonic God, and the worship of the Masonic God is socially normative, while there will be a lot of disbelievers among them who are just conforming to society's expectations. So ultimately, atheism is part of the plan. When you see the Church of Satan was founded by a white person who was mixed with Jew, an atheist Jew, they say flat out, and they go to great lengths to make sure you understand their specific type of atheism, which is almost agnosticism, really. It says that they don't know for sure that God doesn't exist, but the suggestions, the claims of religious people in their eyes, in their minds, are absurd. But they're open to the possibility that magic exists. And so they play with it. Make a long story short. And this is exactly what I mean by scientific atheism and the future of atheism. A form of atheism will still exist, but Christianity will not. Because as soon as you alter Christianity, it is no longer Christianity. It is something else. For example, the Quran and the Bible are about 80% the same. So Christianity will be destroyed. But this satanic atheism, this Luciferianism will exist. The atheists are probably the most conformist group, and it's common sense, really. On the screen, you should see a screenshot. I hope I took the screenshot. I hope I was able to put it. Of some Indian female. I didn't show her picture so she couldn't complain about it. And she said she's an atheist, and in parentheses, not a dickish one. How often do you think that Christians need to put something like that, or, you know, some sort of a good group? It's like she basically admits that she's part of a group of people that tend to be obnoxious, and it goes back to them being conformists. I mean, do they really even have the chance to be anything but shallow, conformist, and evil? No. They don't. And then she goes on to say that if you live with your parents, swipe left, in other words, press X or don't like. Now think about this. I've said that atheism is synonymous with Satanism and materialism. Because what else do they have to care about but that which is of this world? As soon as you say you don't believe in God, as soon as you're part of a major movement that attacks religion and claims that it is a control mechanism, you have completely placed yourself under control of this world. I mean, anyone who's really looked into atheism and who pushes the movement and why, they know it is one of the most obviously, controlled by the ruling class movements. I mean, there's no way around it. Atheists bootlick to celebrities and the ruling class. There are few exceptions. And for the same reason the ruling class tends to be a bunch of obnoxious, snobbish, materialistic assholes, it's the same reason that atheists are. Just not all of them have a lot of money, but they all take on that kind of snobbish, I know better than you attitude when they really don't. It's very pathetic, and when you truly look at it, very few atheists aren't racist. And this is complicated because communism tries to attack the idea of race, right? And try to make everyone nationalists. So we're really talking about the non-communist atheists, and I don't respect communists either, that are the racists. It's complicated for you to understand that. But let's look at this, right? Who are the most spiritual people? Who are the most, or let's rephrase this in a way that we can all agree on. What group of people is the most religiously inclined? Well, it's black people. Look at all the different religious cultures in Africa. One could say that religion and Africa are synonymous. They are one and the same. And any time there's been a communist regime that sprung up or a non-religious regime, it was brought in and funded by foreigners. Russia and what have you, China, etc. These atheist ideas were forced on Africa by often brutal regimes, such as Mengistu. Yet they were celebrated in some cases, such as Patrice Lumumba, who was right to be anti-colonialist, but was wrong about who all the colonialists really are. Communism was the controlled opposition from the ruling class, another way for the West and Israel to funnel and exploit, funnel money out of, squeeze money out of Africa. But anyway, let's just go back to very basic ideas, shall we? Because this might go over many of your heads, so I'm gonna keep it relatively simple. Atheists are materialist scum. They are materialistic trash, whether they have money or not. I'll give you an example. Put a picture in your head. Imagine there's a bathroom and there's a ladder going up from the bathroom. And it goes up to the heavens in all of its glory and purity. Atheists are the people who choose to live their life in the toilet, in a used and dirty, feces-filled toilet, while denying that there is a higher existence. Because that is what the material world really is, right? It's a shit-filled world. I mean, I hate to disgust you, but let's really look at things for what they are. What is dirt if not mixed with a certain amount of shit? Bird shit, different animals, and so on and so forth. Dead bodies. I mean, this is like a graveyard full of shit that happens to produce pretty plants and so on. And then there's the white man's bullshit. Technology, contamination. It's contaminated, toxic shit with a bunch of selfish, petty people who are striving to put you beneath them. A bunch of mass murderers, mass druggers, law enforcement scum, corrupt cops and rapists. I mean, this world is full of evil, toxicity, crap, drugs, just complete filth. And an atheist is the person who says the only thing that really exists is this world. And of course, the universe and the stars, what have you. But they're living completely in this world. Their mind is in the gutter. It's in the toxic shit. And their inability to connect to a higher power means they can only be so good. They can only be so convicted about doing right. And here's the main problem. They can never truly understand what it means to be right. Because all these things come subjective. There is no higher power saying this is right and that is wrong. Anytime an atheist wants, he can throw out the book, throw out the rules of right and wrong and do it any way he wants. An atheist basically is a Luciferian, basically is an atheistic Satanist who follows satanic ethics, if you will, at best. And a lot of you are just too stupid to understand. And you'll see, I've come across hundreds of ignorant atheists, especially after an ignorant atheist made a video about me, and all of his brain-dead friends co-signed and whatnot. Atheism is ignorance. It is a very pitiful, disgusting existence, where one is preoccupied and fixated on all that is contaminated, toxic, evil, and filthy. An atheist has a dirty mind and a dirty soul if their soul is still there at all in the first place. They know nothing about virtue and honor. These things are subjective to the atheists. If they feel like making themselves feel good by pretending they have these things, they will. But they really don't have any divine importance because they deny divinity and the divine. And I see these disgusting little people. Oh, you might get all done up like the typical conformist bitch, but you're a sick person. And what really is a sick person? When you see someone sick in the hospital bed, right? They're pale. They seem like they have less life than everyone else. Well, what is an atheist? It's someone who doesn't have a connection with God, and God is what gives, is the being that gives life. He is the creator. So an atheist is like a brain-dead robot or a sick person that is walking around instead of laying in a hospital bed because they are less alive than the Christian. And of course, they've teamed up with all the sickos, the rich, the greedy, the scientific community, all the sickos who focus on worldly nonsense. Gays who grew up in a predominantly Christian nation who push away the Bible because they want to focus on another man's ass and the disgusting things that are found within. These people are notorious for dwelling in a world of shit. It's disgusting.
It is all the sickos. I just read an article about how the FBI recruits a bunch of informant sickos and people they were described as unstable by other agents. They said there's a lot of unstable agents who are provoking people to commit terrorist acts and that they don't understand why. And they're not going to pretend to understand. And those of us who've looked into this, it's almost impossible that this is an accident. The agency is very well aware of what is going on, and it's not just them. There's a lot. It's Freemasonry and their allies just ruining the world with their inferior philosophies. Looking at the world through the lens of science, looking at religion through the lens of science, is basically being an atheist. Science couldn't possibly quantify or understand God. So as soon as you say, well, I'm going to look at it from a scientific perspective, you're basically saying, well, all this stuff isn't true. It's a cute little story. That's where it takes you. So all you atheists, you think you're so smart taking shots at me. You think you're so fucking smart dwelling in a world of shit. It is disgusting. And it's what allows you to do this to me in the first place. And you bring everyone down with you. You're trying to, being, so conformist and, we like these TV shows and all this stuff, I want you all to remember one thing if you don't remember anything else. And this might wake up some of you. It doesn't matter how nice someone seems. If they are a bad person, then they are a bad person. Unfortunately, I can't end it there. I have to cover these things. A lot of you will say, well, the Masons are deists. The Masons are basically people who have come to the conclusion that they can be their own gods, just like a Buddhist or a Hindu. They are ultimately atheists. Atheists who practice some sort of a phony religion. In the lack of a belief in God, one becomes an atheist. In the belief in human potential instead of an all-powerful being or beings, one is an atheist. So a deist actually is an atheist. Their God is someone they think they can manifest. It's very complex if people don't understand this. This is why Satanism sprung out with atheistic Satanism and all this stuff at the same time. I've listened to many Masons' arguments. Their argument goes something like this. Why should we worship a God who's so sadistic and sick that he felt the need to crucify his own son to satisfy him? Okay, and really what they're getting at is either that God doesn't exist or the devil was right. So their stance, and remember, it's scientific. Where is the definitive proof of God? From a scientific perspective, nature seems to suggest that there is a God, but there is no nail in the coffin. Therefore, they are agnostic and they are atheists. There's no other way. Now, one more thing I felt the need to address. Atheists who really do their research come to the conclusion that the world has been influenced by inferior forms of life who are religious. So where does religion really come from? Where do the main religions of the world come from? They come from colored people. Semites, blacks, Asians, non-white people. Most atheists in America, for obvious reasons, are white. You think that magically misses the more educated atheists? Magically they don't see that connection. They see religion as a primitive colored person's philosophy that is, that makes them delusional and leads them, to a path of insanity and a loss of mental health. They see the white man through psychiatry. Johann Christian Well, the Jews like Franz Kallmann, the whites and the Jews as having, as trying to save humanity from the massive delusions, this mass delusional state. Okay, they say, well, these whites and these Jews came along with communism and psychiatry and so on, and they're trying to save us from these delusional colored people with their sky god fantasies and these other religions. You got to really see it for what it is. Now, the only reason why the average atheist in America probably isn't racist, until they go further into, until they get older and really look into what's going on with the politics of it, is because it is socially normative to not be racist. Remember, they are conformists. All they know is the material world and what has been taught to them by men who don't know God.
I'm heavily fumed. Don't forget Galton said that he wanted to repopulate Africa with Asians. And he's one of the main people, if not the main person, who laid down the blueprint for eugenics. He even coined the term, and he won all kinds of awards from England and France, and statistics, and psychology, and mental testing, and so on. It looks like they're not going to let me upload this Paris clip. It basically goes, you can't imagine how much money they spend trying to silence good people who put their life on the line to fight for change. Since I already made part 3, I referred to this. I'm going to leave it there. So don't be surprised when you see certain groups of people collaborating together to bring in the agenda of the ruling class, which includes giving them respect, like they would get in Japan or India, with people bowing their heads to them and, quote-unquote, knowing their place, as opposed to black culture of, quote-unquote, uppity Negroes, or Christianity, which sees the rich people as spiritual bottom feeders. So Masonry will pervert Christianity and everything they can to get you to conform. And that's why there are ordained ministers in psychiatric institutions. Psychiatric institutions that admit that they are adverse to Christianity. Now, if one simply thinks this through, they quickly come to the conclusion that Christianity and Islam are the main enemies of the secret society structures in the New World Order. Because these are different philosophies that came together in Masonic lodges during a period of time where the West and the Jews were threatened by Islam. They were surrounded with masses of Christian people that they had no love for. They were a bunch of rich people, and the rich architects and masons who were given wealthy, great sums of money to build things. They were commissioned to build things. Famous chapels and libraries and government buildings and mansions and what have you. They were given tons of money. They built things everywhere, and they were paid handsomely to do so. And they got to know the rich people as they talked about how they wanted these buildings to be built. And the rich people talked about how much they appreciated how great the building is, and can you build another building for my son, and, for my cousin who's a lord, who's a duke, and so on. And they became this kind of close-knit society, this kind of closed society, building secret passageways for rich sadistic people to rape and abuse people and do little sadistic little rituals, as they explored the religious meanings in the architecture and the symbols with the rich people and brought them in to their secret societies. They became more and more powerful, and they resented the Christian peasants. They resented the clergy for preaching a message that made them look bad, so they executed them. They made their own churches, the Anglican Church. They executed clergy. They infiltrated the Vatican. And they made sure that rich people and all their little philosophies would feel accepted by society and even respected. They started changing the course of society and the philosophies therein in a way that celebrated the rich. The Ku Klux Klan, even. One of the second Klan symbol, I believe, was a yin-yang symbol. All over, they started building banks for the bankers. These nice, elaborate buildings you see, with sophisticated architecture. Who do you think built those buildings? Architects, masons, builders, people in secret societies. So they resented the Christian peasants for putting God before them and for being against feminism, witchcraft, homosexuality, greed, lust, adultery, idolatry, all the things that they were interested in. They were the main enemies, the people. It was the Christian masses versus these rich sickos and their quote-unquote scientific friends. And of course, they're gays and feminists and all the people who felt marginalized or by Christianity and mainstream Christian culture. And they hated Islam because whether or not they were Christians, they felt threatened by Islam for hundreds of years. And Masonry goes back. They trace their roots to the Crusades. They were taught by the secret societies that clashed with the Muslims, literally, in the Middle East. The sieges of Jerusalem, the Battle of Acre, and so on. So they resented real Christians and they resented Muslims. And for hundreds of years, they have been their enemies and they are still their main enemies. Now, so you explain to me how a bunch of atheist scientists magically are against any atheist movement. They embrace them. They welcome them. They promote them. They fund them. They smile upon them.